Okay, this is the whiteboard review for Math 2 Unit 9. Number 1, simplify. This is an addition problem, so we want to add like terms. Both of these are like terms, which means we keep the x to the second power and you add the coefficient. So my answer is 8x squared. Number 2, this is also a subtraction problem, so you don't want to multiply the two binomials together, but you want to make sure you subtract everything in the second set of parentheses. So this becomes 3x plus 8y stays the same, and then you want to do minus 4x and subtract a positive 8y, which would be minus 8y. That'd be the same as distributing a negative to each term. Then I want to check for like terms. So 3x and negative 4x are like terms. 3x minus 4x is negative 1x, or just negative x. And then positive 8y minus 8y is 0, so those cancel, and your answer is just negative x. Number 3 says factor. This is, first I want to check my binomials for difference of squares. It is subtraction, so that means difference, and x squared is a perfect square, 9 is a perfect square. So x squared factors to x times x. 9 factors to 3 times negative 3. So my answer here is x plus 3 times x minus 3. You always want to check your answer, because this only works with difference of squares. So I'm checking x plus 3 times x minus 3. I'm doing my base times my height. X times x is x squared. 3 times x is 3x. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. And negative 3 times positive 3 is negative 9. After multiplying these together, I combine like terms. Negative 3x and positive 3x combined to give you 0, which means after multiplying these together, I get x squared minus 9, which was my original question. So that means yes, x plus 3 times x minus 3 does multiply to x squared minus 9, which means x squared minus 9 factors to x plus 3x minus 3. So make sure you're giving this as your answer. And this is just the part where you check your work. So I'm saying, yes, I was able to get back to the original question. Number 4, we want to factor this expression. The best way to do that is to write out x plus 3 squared as x plus 3 times x plus 3. The rest of the equations, or the expression, stays the same. Okay, so now I have x plus 3 times x plus 3 minus x plus 3 times x plus 2. The same thing that's being multiplied to in each of these expressions is x plus 3. That is the exact same here and here, which means it's my greatest common factor. You bring your greatest common factor out to the front, and after dividing it out of each term, we can see what's left over. So these x plus 3's cancel, and I'm left with this x plus 3. These x plus 3's cancel, because x plus 3 over x plus 3 equals 1, and I'm left with this x minus 2. But remember, it was a binomial. There were two terms up here. So what separates these two terms from each other is this subtraction sign. So make sure you have that subtraction sign in your answer as well. My answer for number 4 is x plus 3 times the quantity x plus 3 minus x plus 2. Number 5, we want to multiply 3 different terms together. So multiplying the first term, which is 2 times 3x plus 4, we can distribute the 2 to each term in the first binomial. So that gives me 6x plus 8, because 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8. We're just going to bring this binomial straight down. Then, to multiply binomials, you have two options. You can use it as a base.
Elena Rodriguez, please report to the attendance office. Elena Rodriguez, please report to the attendance office.
You can use it as a base and a height. My base is 6x plus 8, and my height is 2x plus 7, which means I multiply 6x times 2x is 12x. 8 times 2x is 16x. Oh, sorry. X times x gives me x squared. Don't forget your x squared term. 6x times 7 is 42x. And 8 times 7 is 56. When I separate these using the area model, I'm doing my base times my height, which means my area is all of the areas inside combined. So I get 12x squared. You add 42x plus 16x to give you 58x. And then add 56x to the end. And that is your answer. But if you wanted to multiply these by using distribution, it would look like this. You would distribute the 6 to each of these terms. So distribute the 6, and we get 12x squared. 6 times 7 is 42x. Distribute the 8 to each term, and you get 16x and 56. And then you can combine like terms to get 12x squared plus 58x plus 56. You can see that I got the same answer as on the right hand side. On the right, I used the area model, and on the left, I used distributing. Distribute the first term, distribute the second term. Either way is correct. We've been using the area model. So for the purposes of this class, I'm going to show the rest of the examples of multiplying using the area model. Number 6, multiply x plus 3 squared. That just means x plus 3 times x plus 3. I write it out twice because it's to the second power. Then to multiply using the area model, we're going to do x plus 3 times x plus 3. Give you x squared plus 3x plus 3x plus 9. Combining like terms, 3x and 3x are my like terms, so it gives me x squared plus 6x plus 9. And that is your final answer. Number 7 says, what are all the factors of 10x cubed minus 2x squared minus 12x? First, I want to look for a greatest common factor. They're all divisible by 2. So 2 is part of my greatest common factor. They're also all divisible by x.
Guadalupe, please report to the attendance office. Covarrubias, Guadalupe, please report to the
That is my
attendance
lowest exponent. So I won't have anything higher than a 2x that I'm dividing out. Your greatest common factor goes out in front, and you're left with 5x squared minus 1x minus 6. This 2x is one of our factors, but the rest of my factors I need to get by factoring 5x squared minus 1x minus 6. So I'm going to factor this on the side. By using my diamond. Using the diamond, we multiply the first times the last, and that gives us negative 30x squared. The negative 1x goes to the bottom. I want to figure out what numbers multiply to give me 30, so that's 1 times 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. But I need to see what numbers of these also combine to give me negative 1. In order to get a negative number, I need to do a negative times a positive. If I made my 5 negative and my 6 positive, negative 5 plus 6 is positive 1. I don't want a positive down here. I want a negative. So a negative 6x and a positive 5x would combine to give me negative 1x. So this is actually equal to, I'm going to keep the 2x the same. Oh, sorry. Sorry, we're going to factor this side first before we get to that portion. So I'm going to use the 5x and the negative 6x to split up this term here. So the 5x squared stays the same. Then I'm going to use these two numbers instead of this negative 1x here. So I'm going to use the positive 5x and the negative 6x. And then this number right here comes down to join us. So all of these, they shouldn't change the value here. The 5x squared should stay the same, the negative 6 should stay the same, and these two should add to the number that you had prior. And then you're going to factor by grouping, which means we split it and say, what's the greatest common factor here? I can divide by 5 and by x. So when I divide everything by 5x, 5x squared divided by 5x gives me 1x left over. 5x divided by 5x is 1. So I'm going to show that again. 5x squared divided by 5x is x. 5x divided by 5x is 1. Whatever you're dividing by goes out in front of your parentheses. So this 5x in my denominator goes out in front, and whatever's left over goes inside. These are both divisible by negative 6. That means the negative 6 goes out in front of my parentheses, and whatever's left over goes inside. So this negative 6x divided by negative 6 is just x. Negative 6 divided by negative 6 is positive 1. These binomials should match each other. So we factor out the x plus 1, and left over is 5x minus 6. So 5x squared minus 1x minus 6 factors to x plus 1 times 5x minus 6. So I'm going to put that right here. X plus 1, 5x minus 6. So that I remember 2x was also one of my factors. So what are all the factors of this trinomial? One of them is 2x, another one is x plus 1, and another one is 5x minus 6. Because those are the three things I multiply together to get 10x cubed minus 2x squared minus 12x. Number 8, multiply and combine like terms to determine the product. Product means multiply, so I'm going to do base times height. My base is 3x minus 5. My height is 5x plus 2. 5x times 3x is 15x squared. Negative 5 times 5x is negative 25x. 3x times 2 is positive 6x. And negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. My middle terms combine. Negative 25 plus 6 is negative 19. They were both x terms, so negative 25x plus 6x is negative 19x. My first and last term don't have like terms. So you just write that one out in front, this one out in back, and you combine the two middle terms. And 15x squared minus 19x minus 10 is our final answer. Please see the next video for the next page. This is Math 2, Unit 9, Whiteboard Review, video number 2. Number 9, multiply and combine like terms to determine the product of 2x plus 1 times x squared minus x minus 6. When I'm finding a product, that means to multiply, and we've been multiplying using the area model. Okay, so I'm going to multiply my base of 2x plus 1 times my height of x squared minus x minus 6. And you can put, remember, multiplication is commutative, so you can put this is my height and this is my base, and that's fine as well. And that's what I've shown on the left. So 2x times x squared is 2x cubed. Negative x times 2x is negative 2x squared. 2x times negative 6 is negative 12x. X squared, now this term is 1, so I'm going to multiply it by each of these, and I'm going to get the same exact thing. So x squared minus x minus 6. And then I want to combine like terms. 2x cubed has no like terms. So I'm going to write the 2x cubed on the side. X squared minus 2x squared is negative x squared, or negative 1x squared. Remember, these have opposite signs, so this is like doing 1 minus 2. The negative 12x and the negative x are also like terms, so I have negative 1 and a negative 12 gives me negative 13x. And negative 6 has no like term, so it goes at the end. Check this. If you didn't start with any like terms in each polynomial, then you shouldn't have any like terms at the end. So that's my final answer. Remember, I did have like terms, and I combined those already to get these two numbers. But you should have 4 terms, since I started with x to the second power, and this was just x. Number 10, a square has a side length of 3x minus 2. If it's a square, that means both sides are 3x minus 2. And I can use the area model to multiply these. 3x times 3x is 9x squared. 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x. 3x times negative 2 is still negative 6x. And negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Negative 6x and negative 6x are like terms. Negative 6 plus negative 6 is negative 12. So your answer is 9x squared minus 12x plus 4. Number 11, factor completely. In order to factor completely, you first want to look for a GCF. My greatest common factor is whatever can be divided out of both of these. 6 and 27 are both divisible by 3. Then I look at my variables. They're also both divisible by the lowest amount of x's. So x to the 5th and x squared, they each have at least 2 x's. So x times x. And they each have at least 1 y. So my greatest common factor is 3x squared y. Your greatest common factor goes out in front of your parentheses. So you divide it and see what's left inside the parentheses. So I'll see what's left inside here. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. X to the 5th divided by x squared is x cubed. And y over y is 1. So they reduce. Minus 27 divided by 3 is 9. X squared divided by x is the same, so it's 1, and they reduce. Y squared divided by y is y. My second step is to factor the polynomial. This polynomial, it has two terms, so it's a binomial. In binomials, I want to check for difference of squares. Difference, yes. Squares, no. 9 is a perfect square, but y is not. 2 is not a perfect square. X cubed is not an even exponent, so it's not a perfect square. Because these are not perfect squares, this is my final answer. And I don't factor anymore. Number 12. First check for your GCF. Neither of these is both divisible by the same coefficient because 4 is divisible by 1, 2, and 4. 25 is divisible by 1, 5, 5, and 25. So 1, 5, and 25. So my greatest common factor here is 1. They don't have the same variables either. Then I factor my polynomial. So at this one I'm checking, since it's a binomial, meaning two terms, I'm checking for a difference of squares. Difference, yes, because it's subtraction. Are these each perfect squares? Do they multiply to do the same term times itself to give you that value? Yes, 2x times 2x is 4x squared. Same term times itself to give you that value. 5y times 5y gives me 25y squared. But in order to do the difference, one of these has to be negative. So a positive 5y and a negative 5y. So your first term has to be exactly the same, and your second two terms have to be opposites, but exact opposites. So these factor to 2x plus 5y and 2x minus 5y. That is my answer. I'm going to check that answer on the right by multiplying. Multiplying 2x plus 5y times 2x minus 5y, I get 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 5y times 2x, 2 times 5 is 10. X times y is xy. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. X times y is xy. 5y times 5y, sorry, negative 5y. 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. Y times y is y squared. Check to see, are these two opposites, and are they exact opposites? Yes, so when they combine, they equal 0. Meaning, inside area is 4x squared minus 25y squared. Is that the polynomial that I started out with? Yes, which means this works, and I solved it correctly. My base and my height are 2x plus 5y. Number 13. 1. Find the GCF. My first term is 1x squared. My last term doesn't have any x's, so there's no x in common from all of these, and my greatest common factor is 1. 2. Factor the polynomial. This is a trinomial, meaning 3 terms. In order to factor trinomials, we use the diamond. We multiply the first times the last term, which gives us 28x squared, and my middle term goes in the bottom of my diamond. I want to know what two numbers, or what two terms multiply to 28x squared and add to 11x. That's 7x and 4x. 7x times 4x is 28x squared. 7x plus 4x is 11x. There are two ways to factor that we've talked about. One is by the area model, and one is by grouping. So if I use grouping, I want to write my first term and my last term exactly the same, but I split up my 11x to be 7x plus 4x because this still equals 11x, but I want to split it so that I can make two groups that have two binomials each. My greatest common factor between x squared and 7x is x. And then I divide each of those by x, and I'm left with x plus 7. Over here, between positive 4 and positive 28, my greatest common factor is 4. So I write plus 4 as a positive 4. Dividing each of these by 4, I get x, and 28 divided by 4 is 7, so x plus 7. Then you can see I can factor out my greatest common factor of x plus 7, and then I'm left with x plus 4. So my answer is x plus 7 times x plus 4. If you want to see the area model, please watch to the right-hand side, otherwise you can jump forward. For the area model, I put my first term in my top left box and my last term in my bottom right. I know that x times x gives me x squared, and there's a lot of different numbers that can multiply to give me 28. So I need these two that are diagonal to add up to my middle term. So those numbers still come from this diamond, and you use 7x plus 4x adds up to 11x, but they multiply to 28. So x times what gives me 4x? Well, that's a 4. X times what gives me 7x? That's a 7. And is positive 4 times positive 7 positive 28? Yes. So those are both positive because all of my numbers inside are positive. Then my answer is the same as my binomials from before. It's x plus 4 times x plus 7, and we write it as x plus 4 times x plus 7, each in parentheses. All right, number 14, same thing, multiply first times last. I get negative 24x squared. My negative 10x goes down here, and I want to know which two terms multiply to give me negative 24 and add to negative 10. My factors of 24 are 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. There are two possible options that are 10 apart from each other. 2 and 12, 4 and 6. 3 and 8 do not combine to 10 ever, and 1 and 24 do not combine to 10 ever. So one of these two needs to work. I know that I need to multiply to get a negative number. That means one of my numbers needs to be negative and one of them needs to be positive. So that means I need to use negative 12 and positive 2. Positive 2x, negative 12x. If I had a negative 4 and a negative 6, I would get negative 10, but negative 4 times negative 6 will give me positive 24. So I don't want the 4 and the 6. Using those numbers, I'm going to solve by grouping on the left and solve by area model on the right. Fast forward between which ones you need to look through. If you're more comfortable with grouping, watch first. If you're more comfortable with area model, fast forward to that. So I'm going to write x squared plus 2x minus 12x minus 24. My first and the last terms are the same. These middle terms come from my diamond. Then I want to split them, and my greatest common factor is x, and I'm left with x plus 2. Over here, my greatest common factor is negative 12. I divide that from each, and I'm left with x plus 2. Make sure you're doing negative divided by negative gives you a positive. So you want to take out a negative 12 as your common factor. Then my answer is x plus 2 times whatever's left over. So after you divide x plus 2 out of each of these, then you're left with x and negative 12. So x minus 12. And that is your answer, x plus 2 times x minus 12. If you're doing the area model, the x squared goes in the top left, the negative 24 goes in the bottom right. You still use the 2x and the negative 12x. X times x is x squared. X times 2 gives me 2x. X times negative 12 gives me negative 12x. And negative 12 times positive 2 is negative 24. So again, my answer is x plus 2, x minus 12. Number 15. Multiply your first times your last into your diamond, negative 16m squared. Positive 6n goes on the bottom. The factors of 16 are 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. The ones that add to positive 6 are going to be the 2 and 8. One of them needs to be negative. But when I add, I want a positive, so I want my bigger number to be positive, because it would be 8 minus 2 gives me 6, and 8 times negative 2 is negative 16. So you write out all your terms, m squared minus 2m plus 8m minus 16. Your first and last terms are the same. Your middle terms come from your diamond, and you split. Factor out your greatest common factor from each. These two terms inside should match, so we factor it out to the front. And m minus 2 times m plus 8 is your answer. If you use the area model, the m squared goes in the top left, the negative 16 in the bottom right. Your two terms from your diamond go negative 2m and positive 8m. M times m gives you m squared. Negative 2 times m gives you negative 2m. M times a positive 8 gives you 8m. And positive 8 times negative 2 is negative 16. So my answer is m minus 2 times m plus 8. Please write your answer in parentheses as m minus 2 times m plus 8. Okay, this is Math 2, Unit 9, Whiteboard Review. The last page, number 16 through 21. We're going to factor these, which means we need our diamond, and I multiply the first term times the last term and get 28x squared. My middle term goes at the bottom. On a previous video, we already figured out what numbers multiply to 28x squared and add to 11x. That's 7x and 4x. Just to check, we do 7x times 4x is 28x squared. 7x plus 4x is 11x. On the left, I'm going to be factoring by grouping. On the right, I'm going to factor by the area model. Okay, your first term and last term stay the same. Your middle two terms come from your diamond. We're going to split and find our greatest common factor. The greatest common factor between 4x squared and 7x is x. And I get 4x plus 7 inside. The greatest common factor between 4x and 7 is just 1. And I get 4x plus 7 inside. That means my answer is 4x plus 7 times x plus 1. The x plus 1 comes from x and 1 in front of each set of parentheses, which were my two greatest common factors. To factor by the area model, we put the 4x squared in the top left, the 7 in the bottom right. You're still using the 7x and 4x. And then there are some different things we do to find the outside, but you want to look for your greatest common factor. So this one's easy to see because they both have 4s and they both have x's. So this is 4x. You could try 2, but if you had a 2 over here, you wouldn't get to a 7, so that would be difficult. So 4x times what gives me 4x squared? 4x times x. 4x times what gives me 4x? 4x times 1 gives me 4x. X times what gives me 7? X. Well, x times 7 is 7x. And is 7 times 1 equal to 7? Yes. So I still get 4x plus 7 times x plus 1. Your answer here comes from your outside of your area model. Number 17. Start with your diamond, multiply your first times your last, you get 24y squared. On the bottom is negative 11y. Numbers that multiply to 24. We did this on the opposite side as well, I believe. 24 and 11. Nope, that was 24 and 10. So in this case, I want it to add to 11. And I want it to be negative 11. So if I need to add to a negative but multiply it to a positive, both of my numbers need to be negative. A negative times a negative is positive. A negative plus a negative is a larger negative, or a more negative number. So this is negative 3y and negative 8y. Write your first and last term. Minus 3y minus 8y plus 4. Split them and group. The greatest common factor between 6y squared and negative 3y is 3y, and I'm left with 2y minus 1. Greatest common factor between negative 8y and positive 4. Always check if this first term is negative, we're going to take a greatest common factor of a negative number out. So negative 2. Divide each of these, oh sorry, no, negative 4 is my greatest common factor. Negative 4. Negative 8 divided by negative 4 is a positive 2. Positive 4 divided by negative 4 is negative 1. So my answer is 2y minus 1 times 3y minus 4. I'm going to factor using the area model on the right hand side. In the top left, I have 6y squared. In the bottom right, I have positive 4. These two numbers come from my diamond, so negative 3y and negative 8y. I want to look for the greatest common factor. My greatest common factor between 6x squared and negative 8y is 2y. The greatest common factor between 6y squared and negative 3y is 3y. And you want to check 3y times 2y. Is that 6y squared? Yes, it is. 3y times what gives me negative 3y? Negative 1. 2y times what number gives me negative 8y? Negative 4. And negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. So that works, which means my answer comes from the outside, which is 2y minus 1 and 3y minus 4, which is nice because those match. You can solve either way. You do not need to solve both ways. Alright, same thing. Diamond, multiply your first times your last. This gives me 30. This should be a b right here. 30b squared. So that gives me 30a squared b squared. And at the top is, or at the bottom is negative 11ab. Your terms right here should be AB and AB. They should match the bottom. Should be exactly the same. Because if they add up to the bottom, they have to be like terms with the bottom. What numbers multiply to 30 and add to negative 11? If it adds to a negative number and multiplies to a positive, they both need to be negative numbers. So negative 5 and negative 6 multiply to positive 30 but add to negative 11. And this is what our grouping looks like. A squared minus 5AB minus 6AB minus 30B squared. Remember, we changed that to a B squared instead of a Y squared. You're going to split. Greatest common factor here is A, and I'm left with A minus 5B. Greatest common factor here is negative 6, B, because they each have a B, and I'm left with, well, let's check, because sometimes it's hard to see. I divide by negative 6B. Negative 6 divided by negative 6 is 1. B divided by B cancels, and I only have an A left over. Negative 30 divided by negative 6 is negative 5. And B squared divided by B is B. Does my A minus 5B match? It does. So my answer here is A minus 5B times A minus 6B. I'm going to factor using the area model on the right hand side. Same exact problem. First term goes in the top left. Last term, 30b squared, goes in the bottom right. This negative 5ab and negative 6ab need to both be used. A times A is A squared. So I already know those two values. A times what gives me negative 6ab. Well, I already have an A, but I need a negative 6 and I need a B, so negative 6b. I already have an A here, so I need a negative 5 and a B to give me negative 5ab. Negative 5 times negative 6 is positive 30. B times B is B squared. So that checks out. These two give me my answer, which is A minus 5B times A minus 6B and they match. A shipping box in the shape of a rectangular prism has a volume of 2x cubed plus 7x squared plus 5x. What are the factors that can represent the possible dimensions of the shipping box? Remember, volume of a rectangular prism is length times width times height. We learned that last semester. So, I need three things that multiply together to give me this trinomial. That means I'm factoring it out. Number one, greatest common factor. Always look for your greatest common factor first. I know we did not do it on these problems. Please check for your greatest common factor between each binomial, and you'll see that it equals 1. So you can't factor out more. But in this case, I do have a greatest common factor because all of them have an x. And between my coefficients, it would be a 1. So my greatest common factor is 1x. I divide that out to the front, and I'm left with 2x squared plus 7x plus 5. Then I need to factor this trinomial, which means I use my diamond. 2 times 5 gives me 10x squared. The bottom goes 7x. It needs to multiply to 10 and add to 7. That's 2x and 5x. So when I'm factoring this trinomial, you can use the area model and do 2x squared in the top left and 5 in the bottom right. I know 2x, and 5x need to go into my diagonals. So the greatest common factor in this row is 2x. 2x times x gives me 2x squared. Greatest common factor here is 5, and you can check that because x times 5 is 5x. 2x times 1 is 2x, and 5 times 1 is 5, which means this factors to 2x plus 5 times x plus 1. And remember, my greatest common factor of x goes out in front. When you're factoring by grouping, you should do 2x squared plus 2x plus 5x plus 5. And you're going to split this into two terms. Greatest common factor here is 2x. Greatest common factor here is 5. So you're still going to get 2x plus 5 and x plus 1, but the x is still out in front. That means my three different dimensions are x, 2x plus 5, and x plus 1. You can write these in any order, but they all need to have those values. These last two are error analysis problems, which means you are finding what went wrong. I'm just going to solve it correctly so that I can see what went wrong. So I want to multiply the first times the last, and I get negative 80x squared. And then the positive 2x goes down here. The factors of 80 are 1 and 80, 2 and 40, not 3, 4 and 20. Five and 16, not 6, not 7, 8 and 10, and not 9. All right, the only ones that are 2 apart are 8 and 10. So in order to get a positive number, I want my bigger number to be positive. So that's negative 8x and positive 10x. So I'm going to factor by grouping to x squared minus 8x plus 10x minus 80. I split these. My greatest common factor is x, and I'm left with x minus 8. My greatest common factor here is 10, and I'm left with x minus 8 again. So x minus 8 and x plus 10 is my solution. Notice here, they got a positive 8 and a negative 10. So you want to tell me something about how they got the wrong number. Well, if this was a negative 8 and a positive 10 from my negative 8 here and my positive 10 here, then they chose the wrong two numbers when they were using their diamond. So please explain why they chose the wrong two numbers and how you could choose it correctly in the future. On 21, find and correct the error made. When we're multiplying, we multiply our base times our height. 2x plus 4 times 2x plus 4. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times 4 is 8x. 2x times 4 is 8x. 4 times 4 is 16. 2x times 2x, oh sorry, we already did that, sorry. So once we get all of our areas inside, we can add our like terms, and I get 4x squared stays the same. 8x plus 8x is 16x plus 16. So here, they're missing the middle term. So that tells me they just multiplied 2 times 2 and 4 times 4. You can't just multiply your first terms together and your last terms together. You have to multiply to get 4 separate terms and then combine like terms. Or they might have said 8x times 8x 8x plus 8x cancels each other out. Those don't cancel each other out unless they're opposites. One of them has to be positive and one of them has to be negative in order for the middle to cancel. So those don't cancel. So tell me something about the error they made and how they could do it correctly.